one of my favorite parts of the process of writing the book, actually. I really do love the research. What I do when I develop my characters is I figure out what I would like them to be and then work backwards to who they started out as and what journey they need to go on in order to get from point A to point B. I want women to be inspired by the journey and the evolution of my characters. And I also think that women today are able to embrace their resilience and celebrate their resilience, and our society has finally caught up to who women have always been.
Hi, I'm Demetra Ganias. I am so excited to continue Fairfield County Looks discussion today with author Susie Orman Schnall. We are continuing the Look Literary series, discussing her new book, We Came Here to Shine. Welcome. So excited to see you, Susie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So tell me about this idea of coming to shine at the 1939 World's Fair. Transport us into the world that you created through your novel.
Well, when I first learned about the World's Fair, and that was through Esther Williams' autobiography, The $1 Million Mermaid, she writes vividly about swimming in Billy Rose's aquacade. And when I read that, I thought, aquacade? What's an aquacade? I'd never heard that word before. So I did research and found out that Billy Rose's aquacade was the highest grossing attraction at the 1939 World's Fair. It was a synchronized swimming spectacular. So I started doing research on the aquacade and research on the 1939 World's Fair, and I was captivated, and I thought it would be great to drop some female characters in that time, in that setting, and that's how the novel developed. I really wanted to share that wonderful nostalgic experience with readers.
And tell me about the idea of going back into time. What was the research project like for you? And obviously really developing these characters who are period piece actors.
Well, the research was pretty extensive, and one of my favorite parts of the process of writing the book, actually. I really do love the research. And it involved everything from looking up New York Times articles in their archive to reading books about the New York World's Fair, to reading through websites that catalog a lot of the exhibits and the pavilions of the fair. There are a lot of videos about the fair on YouTube, and I was able to watch portions of the aquacade, actual video from the aquacade, which was incredible.
Wow.
And just watch video of people walking through the fair. What did they wear? They were very dressed up, which I thought was very interesting. And one of the most exciting parts of my research was actually going down to Flushing Meadows Corona Park in Queens, which is where the 1939-1940 World's Fair actually was. Also the site of the 1964-65 World's Fair. And for people who know that area, which is near LaGuardia Airport and Citi Field, the relics that you see there today are from the 1964-65 fair. There's very little there from 1939-1940, but I was able to, the footprint is the same. So I was able to walk the paths that my characters would have walked, and I was able to see what the sightlines would have been for the millions of visitors who went to the World's Fair. And that was just really exciting. And the final thing I did was buy memorabilia off of eBay. So I was able to hold a program from the aquacade and look through it and the pictures. Incredible. And the advertising of the day. I bought costume jewelry like charm bracelets to see what it would have been like to buy a souvenir at the fair, and the daily newspaper that the fair had. So that was really all of that combined to allow me to really feel the rich history of the fair and put that into the novel.
So it's so interesting to read about the women of 1939. Tell me a little bit about the Moxie that they brought to their sport and to this event. It's really a time travel into another place where women were incredibly strong.
Yeah, well, I think, just as we know women of all stripes today, that's exactly how it was then. They just were constrained a lot more by what their families and society and the educational system allowed for them. But it didn't mean that they weren't as gutsy or as bold or as ambitious. And so what I wanted to do with my characters was capture that ambition before it was, squelched, before the fire in them was squelched. So I had women who had every ambition to pursue their personal and professional dreams, and I let them do that in the book However, I was realistic and I presented what the obstacles were in their way, specifically in both Max and Vivi's jobs, who are my two main characters. A lot of the male domination and discrimination that they face by being women in male-dominated professions. But I really wanted their spirits to shine through and let them be who they were.
It's interesting to me to think of a book like The Balance Project and think about Here We Come to Shine and sort of the mix of what women need to do, especially now given COVID. We are taking on so much. Women are handling a lot. Tell me about this enduring grace, this enduring spirit that women carry from the characters in the book to present day.
I think it's just a matter of having to accomplish a certain amount of things from the minute we wake up to the minute we go to sleep, or else everything will fall through the cracks. And we all have our own threshold for what feels comfortable to us. I've never been comfortable with letting too many things fall through the cracks, which definitely has gotten easier as I've gotten older. Now I'm like, oh, you can fall through the crack and you can fall through the crack. But there are women who are much more comfortable with a million things on their plate, and they'll just get to it when they do. And that's one of the things I learned by interviewing women for the Balance Project interview series, is that it's untenable and unnecessary and damaging for us to compare ourselves to other women, because we all come with our own set of experiences, the way we were raised, and that influences and informs the way that we are. So, yeah.
And I'm intrigued by this idea of resilience, because women need to bounce back. And like your characters in the book, and just like women do present day, I think it's so easy to relate to your characters because of these themes and these attributes that sort of carry through the generations. Talk to me about resilience, both in your books and as a mom, as a woman.
Well, I think that my characters are resilient because I wrote them that way, because that's a favorite topic of mine to think about, to talk about, and to explore through my novels. And so, and I, as I said before, I wasn't always bold. And so, for instance, in The Subway Girls, which is my third novel, my character Olivia, who's my present day character, because it's a dual storyline novel, she's really bold. And I kind of wrote her to be the type of woman that I wish I had been when I was 30. And I wasn't as brave then. I kind of followed the rules. I put my head down. I did my work. And so I definitely love the concept of resilience. I think it has come into the national conversation so greatly with grit and resilience, and I think it's such a wonderful thing that our children are learning. And I also think that women today are able to embrace their resilience and celebrate their resilience, and our society is open and welcome and ready for that. I mean, you can just see it in the voices of Michelle Obama and Glennon Doyle, people who are writing memoirs where they are just saying, look, this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be. If you don't like it, I don't care. I am authentically me. And they almost give permission for every other woman to be who they are as well, to be bold, to be ambitious, to not apologize for being ambitious and wanting to accomplish something and wanting to have a career and be a mother and be an independent woman of the world. You know, I think that our society has finally caught up to who women have always been.
Tell me about what you would have told your younger self. You say that you weren't as bold as you wish you had been, or as able to shrug off the expectations as they were placed before you. What is it that you would say not only to yourself, but to other women who are just in that position as you were?
That's such a good question. And I think so much of it was how I was raised and who I was told that I was such a good girl, and that's the role that I felt that I embodied, you know what I mean? That I fit that mold. I fit myself into that form. And I would tell my younger self that there is no form that I need to fit into. That if something doesn't feel right for me, that I don't have to do it. That if I don't want to go to this thing or that thing or be with this person or that person, there's no rules. I don't have to do that. And a lot of women listening to this will be like, okay, what's wrong with her? I never acted that way. And I would say you're very, very lucky that that was your nature and that was how you were brought up by your mother or whoever, raised you to tell you those things. And I didn't have anybody telling me those things. So it's kind of been a process that I've had to learn along the way to give myself permission to question everything and just do what feels right for me.
But I think that's beautiful advice, because no matter how comfortable women feel to varying degrees, there's always another step. There's always a little bit of that feeling imprisoned in what we should be doing. No matter how boldly we step into our position, I think that's such phenomenal advice. What helped shape you when you say, I am this type of person, or the transformation that took place from who you were to who you are? What helped facilitate that change?
Getting older. I think it's just getting older. I think it's also reading about women who inspire me, who are breaking those molds and who are shrugging off conventions. Yeah.
Do you think that with age comes sort of a freedom to get it out there while you still can and be that person that you want to be? Is it the idea that your children are growing up and I better do this now before they're out of my house?
I don't feel that. I don't
inspires you?
necessarily feel a clock ticking yet. I think it's more a freedom that, yeah, I mean, I guess inherent in growing older is knowing that, yes, I'm entering into a new phase, especially now that I have one kid out of the house and two will soon be out of the house. And so just by nature of that, I see what is going to come next. I don't feel pressure. I actually feel joyful that I can shrug off what kind of held me back before.
Do you think in having your characters be this type of woman that you wished you had been, that there's this celebratory joy in watching them unfold as you had wished?
For sure, 100%. I let them do what I wish I had done and what I want all women to do. I want women to be inspired by the journey and the evolution of my characters.
Tell me about decision making. I know that in some of your novels, the protagonist has a decision to make about how they're going to handle something or what's the next step going to be. What do you think brings out the decision that they choose? Is it a maturity? Is it knowing the big picture? What to you helps form that decision?
Well, I hate to burst this fun bubble, but it's really just writing. It's really the craft of writing. It's really knowing what people who are reading historical fiction, the expectations of the genre, what characters tend to do. It's not formulaic, and I'm not writing to a script, but I am knowing that a story follows a certain arc of a character developing, and that if a person starts reading a book and the character does not develop, does not evolve, does not grow from the beginning to the end, does not hit obstacles and conflicts along the way, it will be a very boring story. So what I do when I develop my characters is I figure out what I would like them to be and then work backwards to who they started out as and what journey they need to go on in order to get from point A to point B.
I love that. And in thinking about your two works of historical fiction and your works of contemporary female stories, where do you see yourself going next? Was there an avenue of those two that really ignited something inside of you?
It's interesting because I did start off with contemporary women's fiction, and I think that was because at the time I wrote my first novel, On Grace, the main character was turning 40 and her children were starting school full-time, and so that was semi-autobiographical, except everything that happened to my character in the story did not happen to me. It was just working out some of those feelings. And then The Balance Project was also something that I was thinking about at the time, which is work-life balance. And then when I wrote The Subway Girls, which is my first historical novel, but my third novel, it wasn't so much that I set out to write historical fiction. It was more that I really was fascinated by the story of the women who were in the Miss Subways contest, which was an actual beauty contest in the New York City subway system, and I wanted to tell their story. It just so happened that it was women's fiction from 1949. So that's kind of how that happened, and it's almost the same thing with We Came Here to Shine, in that I wanted to tell the stories of women. It just happened to be in 1939. So I'm not entirely sure where I'm going next. I'm kind of at this really fun, exciting, not scary point in my life where I'm trying to decide if I'm going to write another book, if I'm going to write a screenplay, if I'm going to do something else entirely. I am a little bit interested in writing domestic speculative fiction, which is kind of light Handmaid's Tale is the best way I can explain it to people who are unfamiliar with speculative fiction. It's imagining a world in the future that's not science fiction, but what our lives would be like if you just tweaked our society a little bit.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I've never even heard that term.
So people might be familiar with The Farm by Joanne Ramos, where she writes about surrogate mother factories. Factories is a harsh word for what she really writes about. So things like that. So it's Handmaid's Tale light.
And in going back to We Came Here to Shine, tell me about what it says about our life, that the World's Fair was such a big deal and it lasted for as long as it did. What was society then that sort of allowed this event to be as spectacular as it was?
Well, the idea for the event, so the event was started in 1939, the World's Fair. It was actually conceived of in 1935 as a way to stimulate the economy in New York from the Depression. Within that time, from 1935 when the idea came about to 1939 when it opened, there was war going on. And so it's really interesting to look at this glorious fair, right? The theme of it was the world of tomorrow. There was so much hope. There were 60 countries that came together to participate in this fair. But it was all set against the backdrop of some really heavy and hard stuff that was going on internationally and that the United States was about to enter. And so I think that while still being true to the time period and still being aware of what was going on beyond the shores, I was able in my story to allow my characters to really be in the moment of the glory of the fair. And so I allow my readers to get a behind-the-scenes look. The fair itself is almost a third character, to see the innovation that was introduced, nylons, the dishwasher, television. There was so much to discover and embrace and rejoice on in the fair, and I bring that through the novel.
And tell me about you today. How is Susie feeling in this world of having been sort of reclusive these last few months, as we're all forced to be? Are you really savoring that quiet time, or are you truly itching to be out into the world that was your normal life?
It's such an interesting question because my daily life before COVID-19 is the exact same as my daily life now. You know, as a writer, I work from home. So sitting in my home at my desk is what I used to do. I think that the answer to that question is framed by an individual's situation. And I'm very lucky that my husband's job isn't threatened, that my job isn't threatened, that we can both do our work within the constraints of COVID-19. It was nice to have my children all home for that long, although I definitely feel badly that my oldest had to come home from college and my middle had to come home from a program, and that this has been such an effect on them. But it's almost unfair of me to even say anything negative because of so many who are losing their livelihoods and losing their lives. And it's horrific to read the news and know what's going on in our society and wanting to help. And really, I could go on and on and on about how tragic I think the whole situation is. But for me personally, it hasn't been so bad.
Is there something you learned about yourself or about your family in this time together that was a pleasant spring of information, or just sort of a light bulb going off as far as the dynamic of having everyone back under one roof?
I loved it. And I think I even said to my husband last night as our boys were playing together that I think that this has cemented their bond in a way that nothing ever could have. And obviously we have no idea what the future holds for any of us, but I think that had life proceeded as normal, we wouldn't have had this experience together as a family.
What a beautiful takeaway. And tell me about how you feel connecting with your audience in a different way now. The typical book tour is not going on as it would have, but you are still connecting in so many other ways including your fans getting to listen to you here in a more in-depth way. How do you feel about connecting?
So I love going on book tour. I love going to different places around the country, bookstores and libraries and organizations, and meeting people who have read the book or are hoping to read the book. I think there's something wonderful about that. However, through the virtual book tours that I've been doing, I've gotten to reach so many more people, and I could be doing an event for a bookstore in Delaware and somebody from Michigan is tuning in. So in that way, and that's been the same for so many of my friends. And so instead of also getting, 30 people to show up at a bookstore, you've got 100 people on the Zoom, and then it's rewatched by 500, 1,000 people in the lifetime of this video, which is out there in perpetuity. So yes, there are pros and cons, but I'm doing okay.
And lastly, about We Come to Shine, tell me what you hope women walk away with as a nugget of information or of a feeling that you hope they aspire to because of these women in this extraordinary time.
I think that, so the beginning of the book, I include a quote by FDR, the actual statement he made when he was opening the fair on April 30th, 1939. And when I put that in, I thought, wait a minute, there's something wrong about that, because yes, this is true, this is honest, this is the opening of the fair, and that's symbolically how I want to open my book, but this is a women's story. So I looked for a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, and I found one that said, "You must do the thing you think you cannot do." And I think that sums up exactly what I want women to take from my story.
What a bold, beautiful statement for us all. Susie, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you.